Welcome to HOA craze. She tried to ban me, so I documented everything. I do not get an opinion, you get a fine schedule. Teresa Vaughn screamed that she would make this a lean conversation if I kept denying it. Her hand slammed down on the counter of the Briarwood Reserve Management Office lobby, and the receptionist flinched. I stood there with my manila folder bulging with papers, my gray jacket zipped up against the over-air-conditioned chill, and I watched Teresa's face go crimson. She wore her blue puffer vest like armor, and her light brown ponytail swung as she jabbed a finger at me. She said I stole a padded mailer from the mailbox cluster 2 days ago and she had a witness. I asked who. She said that was not my concern. The receptionist looked between us, her phone halfway to her ear. Teresa was the pool committee chair for Briarwood Reserve Community Association here in Tampa, Florida, and she treated that title like it came with a badge and a warrant. I am a field service engineer, which means I travel for work and I am gone for days at a time. That made me an easy target. She said I was lying about being out of town because she saw my car in the lot. I told her my car has been in the lot because I flew out. She said that was convenient. The receptionist cleared her throat and said management had asked for a statement from both of us. Teresa interrupted and answered for me. She said I refused to cooperate even though I had complied with every single request they made. She said it like it was fact. The receptionist typed something, and I felt my stomach drop. I moved to Briarwood Reserve 6 months ago after a rough financial year. A contract fell through, and I had to rebuild my savings from scratch. I could not absorb bogus fees or legal threats. I could not afford to lose my good standing here because my lease renewal was coming up, and I needed the landlord reference. Teresa knew that. She had asked about my job at a pool committee meeting last month, and I told her. Now she was using it. She said people who travel all the time do not have time to check their mail properly, and that creates liability. The receptionist asked what that meant. Teresa said it meant I was a risk to the community. I asked if she was accusing me of something specific. She said theft. The word hung in the air. She said a padded mailer with ripped seams was found in the trash near my building, and the intended recipient, a woman in Unit 408, never got it. Teresa said the woman filed a complaint and named me. I asked to see the complaint. Teresa pulled out a laminated sheet and waved it like a sword. It was not the complaint, it was a pool rules summary. She said the complaint was on file, and I did not get to see it until the hearing. I said there was no hearing scheduled. She said there would be if I kept this attitude up. The receptionist said she needed to take both statements separately. Teresa said fine and told me to wait outside. I said I was here first. Teresa leaned in close and said I do not make the rules, I enforce them. Her breath smelled like coffee and rage. She said I could wait outside or she would call the police for trespassing. The receptionist looked horrified. I walked out and sat on the bench under the awning. My hands shook. I opened the folder and checked my timeline. I had my flight confirmation, my hotel receipt, my work order log. I was in Atlanta the night that mailer went missing. Teresa could not pin this on me, but she was going to try. 10 minutes later, Teresa came out and walked past me without a word. She had her handheld radio clipped to her vest and she raised it to her mouth as she crossed the parking lot. She said something I could not hear, and then she laughed. I went back inside. The receptionist handed me a blank incident statement form and said management wanted it by end of business tomorrow. I said I would email it tonight. She said Teresa already submitted hers. I asked what it said. She said she could not share that. I asked if I was being fined. She said not yet, but the complaint was logged, and if the investigation found evidence, I could face a violation fee and restricted access to common areas. I felt my chest tighten. Restricted access meant no gym, no pool, no clubhouse. It also meant a black mark on my tenant file. I thanked her and left. I sat in my car, and I called my buddy Mike. Mike used to be on the Briarwood Reserve Board 2 years ago. He quit after Teresa joined the pool committee because, in his words, she made every meeting feel like a hostage negotiation. He kept old files in his garage because he did not trust the current board to handle records properly. I told him what happened. He said Teresa accused 3 people of pool rule violations last summer, and 2 of them moved out rather than fight it. He said she had a pattern. I asked if he had any complaints on file with my name. He said no. I asked if he had complaints from Unit 408. He said he would check. I hung up and I looked at the management office. Teresa was standing by the mailbox cluster talking to a man in a maintenance uniform. She pointed at my building. He nodded. She handed him something. He walked toward the storage closet near the clubhouse. I got out of my car and I followed. The maintenance guy unlocked the storage closet and Teresa followed him in. I stayed back and watched from the sidewalk. A minute later they came out. Teresa held a padded mailer with ripped seams. She waved it at the maintenance guy and said something. He shrugged. She took a photo of it with her phone, and then she dropped it back in a bin inside the closet. I walked up as the maintenance guy was locking the door. I asked what was going on. Teresa spun around and said I was not allowed near the storage areas. I said I was on the public sidewalk. She said the sidewalk was HOA property, and I was violating the access policy. The maintenance guy said he had to go and he left. Teresa stepped closer and said if I kept harassing her she would get me banned from the lobby. I said I was not harassing anyone. She said her radio was recording. It was not. I could see the power light was off. I pointed that out. She pressed a button, and the light came on. She said it had been on the whole time. She said she had me on tape threatening her. I said I did not threaten anyone. She said we would let management decide. I went back to my apartment and I wrote the statement. I included my flight confirmation, my hotel receipt, my work order log, and a request for the doorbell camera footage from the mailbox cluster. Briarwood Reserve installed cameras at every mailbox cluster last year after a rash of check thefts. I submitted the statement at 9 p.m. At 10 p.m. I got an email from management. It said my portal access was suspended pending investigation. I could not log in to pay rent, submit maintenance requests, or view notices. I called the after-hours line. No one picked up. I left a message. I did not sleep. The next morning, I went to the management office at 8 a.m. A different receptionist was there. I asked about my portal access. She said it was flagged by the compliance department and I needed to speak to the property manager. I asked when the property manager would be in. She said noon. I said I would wait. She said I could not wait in the lobby. I asked why. She said there was a note on my account about hostile behavior. I asked who put the note there. She would not say. I sat on the bench outside. At 9 a.m. Teresa walked up with a man in a polo shirt. He had a clipboard. She pointed at me and said something. He wrote it down. She walked into the office. He stayed outside and took photos of the bench, the sidewalk, and my car. I asked what he was doing. He said he was documenting a safety concern. I asked what concern. He said he could not discuss it. He left. I felt my skin crawl. At noon, the property manager came out. Her name was Linda. She looked tired. She said she reviewed both statements and the complaint from Unit 408. She said the evidence was inconclusive, but the policy required a formal review. I asked how long that would take. She said up to 30 days. I said I needed portal access to pay rent. She said I could pay with a check at the office. I said that was not the issue. I needed my account cleared because this was going to follow me. She said she understood, but her hands were tied until the compliance officer made a recommendation. I asked who the compliance officer was. She said it was a contracted position and the person was off-site. I asked when they would be available. She said she did not know. I asked for the doorbell camera footage. She said she would request it. I asked when. She said within a week. I thanked her and left. I was sweating, and it was not even hot out. That afternoon I got a text from an unknown number. It said, "Stop harassing Teresa, or we will involve the police." I did not respond. 2 hours later I got another text. It said, "We have video of you at the mailbox cluster." I knew that was a lie, because I was in Atlanta. I blocked the number. 10 minutes later my phone rang. It was Mike. He said he found something. He said Unit 408 filed 2 complaints in the last year. One was about a noise violation, the other was about a stolen Amazon package. Neither complaint mentioned my name. Both complaints were filed by Teresa on behalf of the resident. He said the complaint forms were identical, same wording, same structure, just different dates and descriptions. He said it looked like someone was using a template to mass-produce fake outrage. I asked if he still had the forms. He said yes. I asked if I could get copies. He said he would drop them off tonight. Mike showed up at 8 p.m. with a folder. Inside were 3 complaint forms. 2 were from Unit 408, 1 was from a different unit. All 3 had the same phrasing in the opening paragraph. All 3 were signed by Teresa as the reporting party. None of them were signed by the actual residents. I asked Mike if that was normal. He said no. Policy required the resident to sign or the complaint was invalid. He said the current board must have changed the rules. I took photos of all 3 forms. I also noticed something else. Each form had a red stamp in the corner. The stamp said filed. The ink was smudged like someone had slammed it down hard. Mike said Teresa loved that stamp. She bought it herself and used it at every meeting. He called it her verdict stamp. I thanked him and he left. I spent the next hour comparing the forms. The complaint about the mailer had a creation date in the metadata. It was dated 2 days after I got back from Atlanta. Teresa did not file it until after I came home. That meant she knew I was not here when the mailer went missing. She filed it anyway. The next morning I went back to the management office. I brought printed copies of the 3 complaint forms with the identical wording highlighted. Linda was at her desk. I handed her the forms and I explained the template pattern. She looked at them for a long time. She said she would forward this to the compliance officer. I asked if my portal access would be restored. She said not until the review was complete. I asked if the compliance officer knew about the doorbell footage request. She said she submitted it yesterday. I asked who handled the footage. She said the security vendor. I asked for the vendor name. She said she could not share that. I asked why. She said it was policy. I felt my patience snap. I said if the HOA was going to accuse me of theft, I had a right to see the evidence. Linda said she understood, but her hands were tied. I left before I said something I would regret. That afternoon, I got another email. It was from Teresa. It said I was harassing her by spreading false information about her complaint process. It said if I continued, she would escalate to the management company regional supervisor. I forwarded the email to Linda, and I asked for clarification on what constituted harassment. Linda did not respond. I called Mike. He said Teresa was trying to bait me into yelling so she could clip it out of context and use it as proof I was hostile. He said the best move was to stay calm and keep gathering proof. I asked what else I needed. He said I needed a witness who saw Teresa near the mailbox cluster the night the mailer went missing. I said I did not know anyone who was there. He said someone was always there. I just had to find them. I walked to the mailbox cluster at 6 p.m. It was the same time the mailer would have been delivered based on the tracking number. A woman was checking her mail. I introduced myself and asked if she lived nearby. She said she was in Building C. I asked if she was here 2 weeks ago around this time. She said she checked mail every day. I asked if she saw anyone unusual. She said no, but she remembered Teresa arguing with the mailbox lock that night. She said Teresa was trying to open someone else's box with a keyring. The woman said she asked Teresa what she was doing, and Teresa said she was checking for misdirected mail. The woman said it looked strange, but she did not think much of it. I asked if she would be willing to write that down. She said sure. I gave her my number, and she texted me her statement 20 minutes later. I had my first witness. The next day, I went to the security vendor office. It was in a strip mall 3 miles from Briarwood Reserve. I walked in and asked for the footage from the mailbox cluster camera for the night in question. The clerk said I needed written authorization from the property manager. I said I already requested it through Linda. The clerk checked his system and said there was no request on file. I called Linda from the parking lot. She said she submitted the request, but it could take a few days to process. I said the vendor had no record of it. She said she would follow up. I hung up and I went back inside. The clerk said he could not help me without the authorization. I asked if Teresa Vaughn had access to request footage. He said board members and committee chairs could request footage if they were investigating a violation. I asked if Teresa had requested footage recently. He said he could not share that information. I thanked him, and I left. I sat in my car and I realized Teresa must have already pulled the footage. If it showed me, she would have used it by now. If it showed her, she deleted it or never requested it at all. I called Mike and told him. He said Teresa had vendor access for pool incidents but not for general security footage. He said if she pulled footage without authorization, that was a violation of the vendor contract. He said I should file a records request with the management company and force them to produce the request log. I said that could take weeks. He said it was the only way to prove Teresa was abusing her access. I said I did not have weeks. The compliance review was already 2 weeks in, and I still had no portal access. Mike said he would make some calls. He knew someone who worked at the management company regional office. He said he would see what he could find out. That weekend I got a knock on my door. It was a tow truck driver. He said he was here to tow my car. I asked why. He said there was a complaint about expired registration. I said my registration was current. He said he needed to see proof. I showed him my registration card. He looked at it and said it was valid. He said he would cancel the tow. I asked who called it in. He said the HOA. I asked for a name. He said he did not have one, just a phone number. He showed me his dispatch log on his phone. The number was Teresa's cell. I took a photo of the screen, and he said he was sorry for the trouble, and he left. I called Linda. She said she had no record of a tow request. I sent her the photo of the dispatch log. She said she would look into it. I asked if Teresa had authority to call tows. Linda said committee chairs could request tows for expired tags, blocked fire lanes, or abandoned vehicles, but only with verification. I said my registration was valid. Linda said she would follow up with Teresa. I never heard back. Monday morning I got an email from the compliance officer. It was the first direct contact I had. The email said the review was extended another 2 weeks due to additional evidence. It did not say what evidence. It said my portal access would remain suspended, and I was required to attend a compliance meeting on Friday at 3 p.m. I replied and asked what the meeting was about. The compliance officer said it was a standard procedural step. I asked if I could bring a witness. The compliance officer said residents only. I forwarded the email to Mike. He said that was not standard. He said compliance meetings usually allowed witnesses or legal representation. He said this smelled like Teresa was trying to isolate me. He said I should record the meeting. I said I would. Friday at 3 p.m., I went to the management office. Linda and Teresa were both there. There was no compliance officer. Linda said the officer was attending by phone. She dialed a number and put it on speaker. A man answered and said his name was Rick. He said he was the compliance officer contracted by the management company. He said he reviewed the complaint, both statements, and the additional evidence. I asked what additional evidence. Rick said Teresa provided a witness statement from the maintenance worker who saw me near the storage closet. I said that was a lie. I was on the sidewalk and Teresa was the one in the closet. Rick said the maintenance worker signed a statement. I asked to see it. Rick said it was filed with the management company. Linda looked uncomfortable. Teresa smiled. Rick said based on the evidence he was recommending a violation fee of $300 and a 6-month restriction from common areas. I said I had proof I was out of town when the mailer was stolen. Rick said the theft was not the issue. The issue was my hostile behavior and failure to cooperate. I said I cooperated with every request. Teresa interrupted and said I harassed her multiple times, including following her to the storage closet and sending threatening messages. I said I never sent any messages. Teresa pulled out her phone and read a text out loud. It was the text I got from the unknown number. She said I sent it to her. I said that was a lie. I showed Rick my phone log. The text came from an unknown number, not from me. Rick said he could not verify that without a forensic review. Teresa said I probably used a burner phone. I felt my blood pressure spike. Linda looked at Teresa and then at me. She said nothing. I asked Rick if he reviewed the doorbell footage. Rick said there was no footage available. I said Linda requested it 2 weeks ago. Linda said the vendor reported the camera was offline that night. I asked for the vendor report. Linda said she would forward it. Rick said the lack of footage was inconclusive, but the witness statements were sufficient. I said the witness statements were fabricated. Teresa stood up and said I was calling her a liar. I said I was calling her a thief. The room went silent. Rick said if I continued with accusations he would recommend trespassing restrictions. I asked if I could present my evidence. Rick said I had 2 minutes. I pulled out the 3 complaint forms with identical wording. I explained the template pattern. I pulled out the metadata, showing Teresa filed the complaint after I returned from Atlanta. I pulled out the text from the witness, who saw Teresa at the mailbox cluster with a keyring. Rick said he would review the materials. Teresa said the forms were HOA property, and I stole them. I said Mike gave them to me, and he was a former board member. Teresa said Mike was disgruntled and not credible. Rick said he would need to verify the documents. He said the meeting was over, and he would issue a final recommendation in 1 week. The call ended. Linda stood up and said she would walk me out. I said I could find the door. I left. That night, Mike called. He said his contact at the regional office found something. The management company required all committee chairs to log vendor access requests in a shared portal. Teresa logged 3 requests in the last 6 months. 2 were for pool maintenance. 1 was for security footage from the mailbox cluster. The request was dated the day before the compliance meeting. Mike said the footage request showed Teresa pulled video from the night the mailer went missing. He said if the vendor told Linda the camera was offline, someone was lying. He said I should request the portal audit log. I said how? He said file a formal records request with the management company and cite the Florida HOA statute that requires transparency. I drafted the request that night and sent it to the regional office. I copied Linda and Rick. I also sent a copy to my landlord because I wanted him to know what was happening. The next morning I got a call from a number I did not recognize. It was a deputy from the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. He said Teresa filed a report claiming I was stalking her. He said he needed to ask me a few questions. I said I would meet him at the management office. He said that was fine. I called Mike. He said do not go alone. He said he would meet me there. At 11 a.m. Mike and I walked into the management office. The deputy was already there talking to Teresa. She saw me, and she pointed. She said I was the one. The deputy asked me to step outside. Mike stayed inside. The deputy asked if I had any contact with Teresa outside of HOA business. I said no. He asked if I sent her any messages. I said no. I showed him my phone log. He asked if I owned any other phones. I said no. He asked if I followed her or showed up at her residence. I said no. He asked if I had any witnesses. I said yes. I called the woman from Building C. She answered. I put her on speaker. She confirmed she saw Teresa at the mailbox cluster with a key ring, and she never saw me there. The deputy took her contact information. He thanked me and went back inside. 10 minutes later, the deputy came out with Teresa. She was crying. He told her he found no evidence of stalking, and if she filed another false report, she could face charges. Teresa said she was the reason this place stayed safe. The deputy said that was not relevant. He said if she had a legitimate concern, she should contact his office with evidence, not assumptions. Teresa looked at me and said I would regret this. The deputy told her to stop talking. He left. Teresa went back inside. Mike and I sat on the bench. He said that was a close one. I said she was trying to get me arrested. He said she was trying to get me evicted. He said if I had gone to the meeting alone without a witness, she could have claimed I threatened her in front of the deputy, and it would have been my word against hers. I felt sick. The records request came back 3 days later. The management company sent a PDF with the vendor access log. Teresa made 5 requests in 6 months. The 5th request was for footage from the mailbox cluster camera the night the mailer went missing. The log showed she downloaded the file. It also showed she deleted the request 2 hours later. Mike said that was a smoking gun. I called Linda and asked why she told me the camera was offline. Linda said that was what the vendor reported. I said the vendor access log showed Teresa downloaded the footage. Linda said she would check with the vendor. I said I already had the log. I asked if she was covering for Teresa. Linda said no. She said she was following procedure. I said the procedure was broken. She said she would escalate to the regional office. I said I already did. That afternoon I got an email from the regional office. It said they were launching an internal review of the compliance process. It said my case was on hold pending the outcome. It said my portal access would be restored within 24 hours. It said if I had additional concerns I should submit them in writing. I submitted a 5-page letter detailing every interaction with Teresa, every false claim, every procedural violation. I attached the complaint forms, the witness statement, the vendor access log, the dispatch log from the tow truck, and the metadata from the complaint filing. I sent copies to Linda, Rick, the regional office, and my landlord. I felt like I could breathe again. 2 days later, Teresa showed up at my door. She had her handheld radio and a clipboard. She said she was conducting a routine inspection of exterior storage areas, and I needed to move my bike from the rack. I said my bike was registered and locked per policy. She said the rack was over capacity, and I was the last one to register, so I had to move it. I said that was not in the rules. She showed me a printout. It was a new policy dated last week. I said I never got notice. She said it was posted on the portal. I said my portal access was just restored. She said that was not her problem. She said if I did not move the bike by end of day she would have it removed, and I would be fined. I took a photo of the policy. I called Linda. Linda said she was not aware of any new bike rack policy. I sent her the photo. She said she would check with the board. Teresa walked away smiling. Linda called me back an hour later. She said the bike rack policy was never approved by the board. She said Teresa printed it herself and posted it without authorization. Linda said she was filing a formal complaint against Teresa with the board. I asked if that would stop her. Linda said it should. I asked what should meant. Linda said the board met once a month, and the next meeting was in 2 weeks. I said Teresa would escalate before then. Linda said she would notify the regional office. I thanked her and hung up. I moved my bike to my apartment balcony. I was not giving Teresa another opening. The next week, Mike called. He said the board scheduled an emergency meeting to address the compliance process and Teresa's conduct. He said it was open to residents. I said I would be there. He said bring everything. The meeting was on a Thursday at 7 p.m. in the clubhouse. I showed up at 6:45 p.m. with my folder. Teresa was already there setting up chairs. She saw me, and she walked over. She said I was not allowed in the meeting because I was the subject of an active investigation. I said the investigation was on hold. She said that did not matter. I said the meeting was open to residents. She said the board could exclude disruptive individuals. I asked who decided I was disruptive. She said she did. A man in a suit walked in. He introduced himself as the board president. I asked if I could attend. He said yes. Teresa said I was banned. The board president said Teresa did not have that authority. She argued. He told her to sit down. She did, but she stared at me the entire time. The meeting started. The board president said they were reviewing complaints about procedural irregularities in the compliance process. He said multiple residents reported inconsistent enforcement and retaliation. He did not name me, but everyone knew. Teresa stood up and said she was being attacked for doing her job. She said residents like me were trying to undermine the rules because we did not like accountability. The board president said this was not a debate. He said the board received a letter from the regional office outlining specific concerns. He read them out loud. Unauthorized vendor access, falsified witness statements, unapproved policy notices, abuse of TOA authority. The room was silent. Teresa said the letter was full of lies. The board president said the letter included documentation. He said the board voted to suspend Teresa's committee access pending a full investigation. Teresa screamed. She said this was illegal. She said she would sue. The board president said the meeting was over. Teresa grabbed her radio and her clipboard, and she stormed out. The board president looked at me and said he was sorry. I said thank you. The next morning I got an email from Rick. He said the compliance review was closed and no violation was found. He said my portal access was fully restored and my record was cleared. He apologized for the delays. I forwarded the email to my landlord. He replied and said he was glad it was resolved. I felt a weight lift. But Teresa was not done. 2 days later I got a call from the woman in Building C. She said Teresa confronted her in the parking lot and tried to intimidate her into recanting her witness statement. The woman said Teresa told her she could be held liable for defamation. The woman said she felt threatened. I told her to file a police report. She said she would. I called Mike. He said Teresa was spiraling. He said the board investigation would take a month, and Teresa knew she was going to lose. He said she was trying to destroy evidence and silence witnesses before the axe fell. I asked what I could do. He said document everything, and wait. I hated waiting. That weekend I checked the mail. There was a notice from the management company. It said the vendor security contract was up for renewal, and residents could submit feedback. I submitted feedback. I said the current vendor allowed unauthorized access and failed to maintain camera uptime. I attached the vendor access log showing Teresa's deleted request. I sent a copy to the regional office. 3 days later, the management company announced they were switching vendors. The new vendor would audit all previous access requests and install upgraded cameras. Teresa sent an email to the neighborhood chat. She said the vendor switch was a waste of money, and it was my fault. A resident replied and said Teresa should focus on her own investigation. Another resident said Teresa owed the community an apology. The thread exploded. Teresa was removed as a moderator from the neighborhood chat by the end of the day. Mike called me a week later. He said the board investigation found that Teresa stole petty cash from the pool committee fund, took supplies from the clubhouse storage closet, and opened at least 4 packages from the mailbox cluster over the last 6 months. He said the board reviewed security footage from the new vendor and found Teresa on camera entering the storage closet and the mailbox area multiple times outside of her committee duties. He said the board referred the findings to the management company and recommended termination. He said Teresa was banned from all committee roles and her vendor access was revoked. He said the HOA was also forced to produce records for the state HOA oversight office because the complaint about her conduct triggered an audit. I asked what that meant. Mike said it meant every procedural shortcut the board took in the last 2 years was about to get exposed. I said good. The board sent a letter to all residents. It said Teresa Vaughn was removed from her role as pool committee chair effective immediately. It said the compliance process was under review and residents with concerns should contact the management company. It did not mention theft. I called Linda and asked why. She said the board was worried about liability. I said that was garbage. She said the management company was negotiating a settlement with Teresa to avoid a lawsuit. I said Teresa should be prosecuted. Linda said that was up to the victims. I said I was a victim. She said the stolen mailer was addressed to someone else. I asked if that person was pressing charges. Linda said she did not know. I said I would find out. I knocked on the door of Unit 408. A woman answered. I introduced myself and asked if she was missing a package. She said yes, a padded mailer with craft supplies. She said Teresa told her I stole it. I said that was a lie. I explained what happened. She looked stunned. I asked if she wanted to press charges. She said yes. I gave her the vendor access log, the complaint form with the red stamp, and the witness statement. She said she would call the police. I thanked her. 2 days later, a detective from the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office called me. He said he was investigating a theft and fraud case involving Teresa Vaughn. He said he needed my statement. I met him at the substation, and I gave him everything. He said it was a strong case. He said Teresa would likely face charges for theft and filing false reports. I asked how long it would take. He said a few months. I said I could wait. Teresa tried one last move. She filed a complaint with the management company claiming I was spreading defamatory rumors about her. The management company rejected it. She appealed to the regional office. They rejected it. She threatened to sue. Her attorney sent a cease and desist letter. I forwarded it to my attorney. My attorney laughed and said it had no merit. He said if Teresa sued, I could countersue for defamation, harassment, and abuse of process. He said I would win. Teresa never sued. 3 months later, the detective called. He said Teresa was charged with petite theft and filing a false police report. He said she pled no contest and received probation and community service. He said the judge ordered her to pay restitution to the victims, including the woman in Unit 408. He said I could file a civil claim for damages. I thought about it. Mike said I should. He said Teresa cost me 3 months of stress, legal fees, and lost time. I filed a claim in small claims court. Teresa did not show up to the hearing. The judge ruled in my favor and ordered her to pay me $1,500 for documented expenses and emotional distress. I never saw the money. Teresa moved out of Briarwood Reserve 2 weeks later. The board hired a new pool committee chair. The new vendor installed cameras with tamper alerts and cloud backup. The management company updated the compliance process to require witness signatures and independent review. The regional office completed the audit and found 12 procedural violations. The board was required to take a training course on Florida HOA law. Linda retired. The new property manager sent an apology letter to every resident Teresa targeted. I framed mine. One day I was at the mailbox cluster, and I saw the woman from Unit 408. She thanked me again. She said she got her restitution check from Teresa. She said it bounced. I laughed. She said she reported it to the court and Teresa's probation officer. I said good. She said Teresa was working at a call center in Clearwater now. I said I hoped she learned something. The woman said people like Teresa never learn. I said maybe not, but at least she could not hurt anyone here anymore. Mike and I got coffee a few weeks later. He said he heard from a friend on the board that the state audit turned up evidence that Teresa had been skimming pool maintenance funds for 2 years. He said the board referred it to the state attorney. He said Teresa might face additional charges. I said I was done thinking about her. Mike said fair enough. He raised his cup. He said here's to standing up to petty tyrants. I said here's to having proof. We clinked cups. My lease renewed without issue. My landlord wrote a reference letter for my file. The new property manager restored my portal access and cleared every note Teresa put on my account. I got a formal apology from the board president. He said the board failed to catch Teresa's pattern earlier, and he took responsibility. I said I appreciated it. He asked if I wanted to join the new compliance committee. I said no. He said he understood. I said I just wanted to live here in peace. He said that was fair. I still see the woman from Building C sometimes. She waves. I wave back. We never talked about Teresa again. The neighborhood feels different now. People are less afraid to question things. The board meetings are better attended. The compliance process is transparent. The new vendor sends weekly camera status reports. It is not perfect, but it is better. I kept the folder. I kept every document, every email, every receipt. I do not look at it often, but it is there. Sometimes I think about Teresa, and I wonder if she ever realized what she did. I wonder if she ever felt bad about the people she hurt. I doubt it. People like Teresa do not see themselves as the problem. They see themselves as the solution. They see rules as weapons and authority as a shield. They see accountability as an attack. That is why proof matters. That is why witnesses matter. That is why you have to stand up even when it is hard. One afternoon I was walking to my car and I saw a new resident moving in. He waved. I waved back. He asked if the neighborhood was nice. I said it was now. He asked what I meant. I told him the short version. He said he heard stories about HOA boards gone rogue. I said they are real. He asked what I did. I said I kept receipts and I found witnesses. He said good to know. I said if he ever had trouble to call me. I gave him my number. He thanked me. I walked to my car and I thought about how many people Teresa probably scared into silence before me. I thought about how many people just moved out because fighting felt hopeless. I was lucky. I had Mike. I had the woman from Building C. I had a landlord who listened. Not everyone has that. The next board meeting was standing room only. The new compliance committee presented updated policies. Residents asked questions. The board answered them. No one yelled. No one threatened. It felt normal. I stayed for the whole meeting. At the end, the board president said they were accepting applications for open committee spots. He looked at me. I shook my head. He smiled. After the meeting, a woman came up to me. She said her name was Karen, and she heard I helped expose Teresa. I tried not to laugh at the name. She said she was thinking about running for the board. She asked if I had any advice. I said read the rules, keep records, and do not let anyone bully you into silence. She said thank you. I said good luck. I got home, and I checked the mail. There was a notice from the management company. It said the annual HOA fee was increasing by $20 to cover the new security vendor. I did not care. $20 was worth it. I logged into the portal and I paid it. My account was clean. My record was clear. My name was restored. I had won. A few months later, I saw Teresa at a grocery store in Tampa. She was in the checkout line ahead of me. She did not see me. I watched her argue with the cashier about a coupon. The cashier looked exhausted. Teresa raised her voice. The manager came over. Teresa said the coupon was valid. The manager said it was expired. Teresa said that was unacceptable. The manager said store policy was clear. Teresa said, I do not make the rules. I enforce them. I almost laughed. The manager said if she did not like the policy she could shop elsewhere. Teresa grabbed her bags and stormed out. The cashier looked at the manager. The manager shrugged. I stepped up to the register. The cashier said sorry about that. I said it was fine. I paid and I left. I never saw Teresa again. Back at Briarwood Reserve, the new compliance committee published a quarterly report. It listed every complaint filed, every resolution, and every procedural change. Transparency was the new standard. Residents could request footage from the new vendor with a simple online form. The board posted meeting minutes within 48 hours. The community felt different. People trusted the process again. I did too. Mike and I still grab coffee sometimes. He said he heard Teresa was asked to leave her new job at the call center after she tried to enforce a dress code she invented. I said that sounded about right. He said people do not change. I said maybe not, but systems can. He said that was the real win. I agreed. I printed a side-by-side timeline of every interaction with Teresa, every false claim, every procedural violation, and every piece of evidence that proved she lied. I laminated it. I handed it out in front of everyone at the next board meeting. The room was silent as people read it. One resident said this should be in the clubhouse as a reminder. The board president said he would consider it. Teresa's name became a cautionary tale. New residents asked about her. Longtime residents told the story. The story got bigger every time, but the core was always the same. Someone abused power. Someone fought back. The system corrected itself. That is how it should work. The HOA was forced to produce records, and the contradictions became public. Teresa was removed from the neighborhood chat moderator role. The consequences were real. The transparency was permanent. I was free. If you made it this far, you know the power of keeping receipts and standing your ground. Hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life HOA drama and neighborhood justice stories that will make you cheer. Until next time, thanks for watching.